So this here is going to be our first lesson on C++. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a very basic C++ program that can print stuff to the console. And then we'll expand the program by adding some functions, some if statements, and some loops to it. Here in IntelliJ, I have a very basic Java program that prints hello to the console. And we can run that, and no surprises there, everything works. And this here is essentially the minimum amount of code that you need to have in order to print something to the console in Java. So let's remind ourselves, what is it that we need to have here? On line 1, we have the class declaration, and moreover, we have the name of the class match up with the name of the Java file. On line 2, we have the declaration of the main method, and the main method is, of course, the main entry point into the program. And the way this declaration is done, it's quite prescribed in Java. It has to be public, static, void, and the method has to take this primitive string array as an argument. And then on line 3, we of course have the typical system.out.println print statement. What I would like to do now is copy and paste this code into a C++ file and see what sort of things will we need to do in order to get this to work in C++. On my desktop, I have the CPP folder, and I'll open this folder with code, which is the text editor that I'm using to write code. And I'll make a new file. I'll save it as first program.cpp, and I'll copy and paste the code that I copied from Java. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to get rid of the class declaration. We will be working with classes quite a bit fairly soon. However, you do not necessarily need to have a class to get started with C++. And this is one of the differences between Java and C++. C++ is not an exclusively object-oriented language. You can definitely have, and definitely will have, objects and classes in C++, but not necessarily everything needs to be a class. Just like in Java, the main method does serve as the main entry point into the program. However, its signature is different. In particular, the main method returns an int, and the main method in C++ does typically take a number of standard arguments. However, this does not necessarily need to be the case. So for now, I'm just going to remove the argument and leave the main method like that. The only other thing that we need to take care of is this print statement. And in C++, print statements may look a little bit weird at first, but just bear with me here. So the way it's done is that you type in cout to start the print statement, and then you type in the left bit shift operator. You then type in your string, hello. You type in another left bit shift operator, and then you type in AND-L for end line. And that's essentially how this print statement is supposed to look like. And I'm going to get rid of the Java print statement at this point. And we can see that VS Code is still complaining that there is some sort of an issue with the print statement. And that is because in C++, even to just have a print statement, you already need to import a package. So I'm going to go up here, and I would type in include, and the package that I need that gives me access to cout is IOStream, standing for input and output stream. And then another thing that you do need to have here is this line that says using namespace std. So don't worry about what this using namespace std means for now. We'll talk about it in one of the later videos. But we can see that at this point, VS Code is not complaining anymore, and that everything seems okay. So let's try to actually compile and run this program. So I will go back to my desktop, and I'll open up my Linux shell in the CPP folder. And I'll type in my G++, and the file name is firstprogram.cpp, and I'll do -o, and I'll call it my program. And things compiled just fine. And now I'm gonna do /my program to run it, and we can see that it has printed hello. So everything is great so far. So now that we got our first program to compile and run, let's look into adding a couple of variables to this program. So I'm going to go back to code, and I'll start off by adding a couple of integers. And the way you do this is an exact way that you would have done it in Java. So here are my integers. And now, to incorporate them into the print statement, you would need to use more of those left shift bit operators. So I'll change this to hello, today is, and then I will add an operator, followed by the variable day, followed by another operator, and then the / as a string. And then we'll put in month, and another /, and finally we'll add year. So essentially, those operators, they act as separators in the print statement. And so here is our updated print statement. For variety's sake, let's also add in a string. And to do that, we would first of all need to include the C++ string library, and then we'll go here and we'll declare a string called greetings, and I'll set this to be hello all in caps, and then I will take this hello out and change this to the string variable and save that. And let's try to compile it. So I'll go back to the Linux shell and run the compilation command, and then run the program again. And here is our updated print statement. What we've done so far is we used the C++ way to print things to the console. And that involves this weird notation that starts with cout, followed by a bunch of bit shift operators to separate out parts of the print statement. There is an alternative way, and that is to use the printf function that comes directly from C. And the way printf function works is that as the first argument, you give it the template of the string that you would like to be printed to the console. Here, %ds are the placeholders for integers. In particular, the first %d is going to correspond to the following argument, and then the next %d is going to correspond to the next argument, and the last %d is going to correspond to the last argument. And this \n here is the new line character that says that the line ends after this print statement for the cursor to get dropped to the next line. So to use printf, you would also need to include another library, which is standard.io.h, and this is the native C input-output library. So we'll go back to the Linux shell, we'll compile, we'll run, and we do see that our second print statement, which is coming from the printf function, now works as well. If we wanted to replace hello with our greetings variable, then we would need to put a %s, which stands for string here, and then we would need to have greetings added as the first argument, because of course that way greetings corresponds to the first placeholder in the string. It wouldn't be appropriate to say put greetings at the end of the function call. So let's save that, and let's go back to the Linux shell and compile, and we get a warning. And the warning is that the string that you're giving to the printf function is actually a C++ string, because we imported the C++ string package to declare the string. Strings in C are much simpler than what they are in C++. So to get the compiler not to complain, what we need to do is we need to convert this greetings variable to a C string, and we can use the C_string method to do that. So we save that and go back to the terminal, recompile, run it, and things now work out fine. So what I've done now is I added this function called tomorrow that uses an if statement to determine roughly what's going to be the tomorrow's date. This is of course not precise because it assumes that all months have 30 days in them, which is when the function returns 1. But the point of this exercise is to show you that really, when it comes to the basics, functions in C++ have the exact syntax as they would in Java. You specify the return value, you specify the function name, you specify the list of arguments along with their types, and then you have a return statement. Likewise, the if statement also has essentially the same syntax as it does in Java. You have the comparator here using the same double equals notation, and you have the typical if-else block. And if you wanted to add an else if, it would be exactly the same way as it is in Java. The function call is also essentially the same as it is in Java. So I put a new print statement here that says tomorrow is, and then it calls the tomorrow function and passes it in our day variable. And finally, comments are done the exact way as they would be in Java. And that goes for both single line comments and multi-line comments. So let's just quickly compile and run this. And we see that tomorrow is going to be the 7th. What I added here now is a function that makes use of a switch statement. The function takes in the month as an integer and returns the number of days in that month. The syntax for the switch statement is essentially the same as it would have been in Java. I've written the switch statement in an optimal way such that cases 1 through 10 all fall through to case 12, which returns 31. As of course, all of those months, such as January and March and May, they all have 31 days. Likewise, cases 4, 6, 9 all fall through to case 11. One thing about switch statements in C++ is that unfortunately they can only switch on an integer. In Java, you would have been able to switch on a string. If you would like to switch on a string in C++, you would have to use something like an enum. You would have seen some enums in Java, but we'll discuss the specifics later on. Once again, in main, I make the call to this day and months function, and I give it I'll give it 5. So let's compile and run this. And we do get the print statement that there are 31 days in May. Finally, I added a for loop and a while loop to our program. The syntax of those is exactly the same as it would have been in Java. In the for loop, we begin with the initial condition of int I equals 0, and then we have the terminating condition of I less than 5, and we have the incrementing factor of I++. In the body of the loop, we just print I followed by the space. And I wanted to have all the numbers print out all on the same line, so that is why we don't have the end line here. We just send the end line to the console once after the loop has finished. With a while loop, we start out with int I equals 3. We run it while I is greater than 0. Likewise, we just print out I followed by the space in the body, and we decrement I using minus minus, and then send the end line after the end of the loop. So let's compile and run this. And we do see that we have printed from numbers from 0 to 4 with a for loop, and numbers from 3 down to 1 with a while loop. So this wraps up this lesson on C++ basics. To finish off, I just have a summary slide of the things that we discussed. So first thing that we talked about is that you don't necessarily need to always use object-oriented programming in C++. You definitely would use it quite a bit, but we didn't use any of that in this video. So not necessarily everything needs to be a class in C++. Then we discussed the signature for the main method. Then we talked about the two different types of ways that you can print things to the console, which this was the C++ way, and we needed to include the IOStream library to do that. And then this was the native C way, where we used printf, and we needed to include the standard IO header from C to do this. And then we went over the variable declarations, functions, comments, if statements, switch statements, and loop syntax, which for the most part was exactly the same as it would have been in Java. Thank you.